had a lot of online clients, and I was getting sick to death of people telling me they were hungry. And I'm saying, you're not hungry, you're bored. Because you're telling me you can't go 2 hours without going to the fridge. We're going to do a 24-hour fast. A sleep of 5 hours or less. Like if you're consistently doing that, it can age you 10 years.
I've followed your advice. I'm getting good 7 to 8 hours sleep. The cravings would then sort of reduce.
Yes. Let's say you have a croissant every morning. Even with good sleep, you're going to fight against that habit.
What advice would you give to anyone who is looking to begin their health and wellness journey?
My advice would be
For the first time ever, the Chef JKP Podcast is going live. We're going to be at Time Out Market Dubai as we bring the heat with unfiltered, exclusive conversations featuring some of the biggest names in hospitality. Mark your calendars. April 13th, 20th and 27th for 3 unforgettable nights of behind-the-scenes stories, insider secrets and culinary revelations. Want in? We are giving away tickets. All you have to do is follow both Instagram accounts and keep your eyes peeled for your shot at winning a pair. Don't just listen, be part of the experience. Hey gang, as you know, here on the Chef JKP Podcast, we discover the movers and shakers of the hospitality industry. We give so much to our guests, but what happens when we don't take care of ourselves, basically, our engine? Today, we discuss something super important. And let's be honest, this is one of the most eye-opening conversations we've ever had here on the show. Now, yes, this is a chef, foodie podcast, all for hospitality professionals. We celebrate flavor, service, creativity. But today there is a twist. We're flipping the plate. We're talking about all things health and fitness. We are diving straight into one of the trickiest and most misunderstood topics ever: dieting and fitness. Because let's face it, how do you stay lean, strong, sharp when your life revolves around incredible food, long shifts, and late nights, plus zero routine? That's where our guest comes in. Michael Canas is a transformation coach who works with high-performing individuals. And trust me, he gets it. This guy lives, breathes discipline, and it's the mindset of real-world strategies that actually work, especially for people with packed schedules, such as chefs, and they talk about real-life pressure. So if you've ever struggled with weight, felt stuck in the cycle of burnout, or just want to feel better and look better, I think this episode is for you. Michael drops some easy, actionable gems, tough love and insights that'll shift your mindset. Now, listen out for tips that can really change the way you eat, train, and show up every single day. Listen out for a story about a head chef. Time to rock and roll.
Hey guys, this is Mike, health and fitness coach. If you like the podcast, make sure to follow, share, and subscribe.
Mike, a very warm welcome to the show. So, as is customary, can you tell me your first or favorite childhood food memory?
Ooh, first, I'm not sure about first, but I remember that I was all about sweets as a kid, you know. So now that my profession is the complete opposite. As a kid, it was all about sweets. I thought that was the meaning of life as a kid. It was all about sweets. I thought no one can have a priority that's more important than sweets, right? So yeah, I was all about candy, as the Americans would say.
Right.
I remember, so one memory that sticks out being very, very young is getting home from school before my mum got back from work and having microchips in the freezer to feed ourselves. Do you remember those?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, the height of nutrition.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But that was that's one memory that sticks out to me. And then it was all about back then when you actually could get sweets for a penny. Do you remember going to the corner shop and you could get a 10p mix and it actually meant something?
So what were the sort of sweets? Did you go for like a full-on mix, or was there one that you loved the most?
It was things, the classics like the cola bottles and the blackjacks and fruit salads, things like that, apple jacks. God, I'm trying to think of something more substantial, but I remember at that age it was all about the sweets.
Yeah. Wow. So were you quite active as a kid because of the sweets? Do you reckon?
Super active. Yeah. Like looking back on it, I was a very skinny kid.
Right.
Very, very active, and I guess that's what kept me skinny.
Okay.
I was always running around. I played every sport. I was doing a lot of. I'd cycle back and forth to school. I'd do cross country running. I'd do football, tennis. Got a bit older, did rugby, so always playing sports. Yeah.
But then when you got into sort of adolescent age, let's say, were you still onto the sweets, or did you go into different things?
Yeah, started to develop. Yeah, I remember. It's interesting. I remember as a kid, I can't remember if it was my choice or my parents' choice, but I would eat steaks well done if I'd have a steak.
All right.
Right now, like I can't be associated with anyone who eats their steak well. But that's so as I started to, I mean, I didn't really get into muscle building or the gym until much later,
Right.
but started to take a little bit more, I guess it wasn't conscious care of nutrition, but I just basically grew out of sweets and chocolates and things like that, and then started eating more proper food, if you like. Yeah.
So then during your educational path, did you want to go into sort of sports and nutrition straight away, or did you study something else?
No, study something else. So I did at A level, I did psychology, and then I went to university to do behavioral ecology. And then what happened then? So I was doing behavioral studies there, and there was a bit of a gap in between. And I've just remembered an interesting memory for you there, a gap in between. And then I got a scholarship offer to do a research-based master's. So I did a master's in behavioral ecology as well. That was basically, was part of a research team. And we were studying a long-term data set on primates, right? So couldn't be further away from nutrition and training and what I do now. But it was just an opportunity that presented itself that I took. But interestingly, in the interim, friends of mine from my undergraduate degree, one of them had been offered the position in a pub, to run a pub. Right. So check this out. So he wanted all his mates to work with him. He didn't want to work with any strangers. So he got 3 of us, and he said, right, you're going to draw straws. One of you is bar manager, one of you is head chef, and one of I can't remember what the other one was. And I'll let you guess which one I ended up being. I was the head chef. And this memory's only just come back to me like recently.
So pub food,
yeah. and I couldn't cook.
Prior to that, you'd never been in the kitchen.
No, I mean I'd bounced between jobs, like pocket money jobs, while I was at uni. So I'd work behind the bar.
Okay,
I think I did one stint in the kitchen because it looked like easier work than the bar work, or at least I'd be closer to food. So I'd developed my love for food by then. So I thought that would be great. I'd be buy all the steaks and the fish and everything like that. I think I went in on my first day. On my first day, someone asked me to get the batter out for the fish, and I spilt it all over the floor on my first. So I don't think I was welcome in the kitchen.
Right. So, but then when you became head chef, were you like, did you do it? Did you do it for a bit? Yeah,
did it. Yeah, winged it for over a year.
No way.
Don't know how. Yeah.
Okay.
Don't know how.
Oh, so you got a bit of experience in the kitchen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, it's it extends to full Englishes.
Yeah.
Deep fried scampi, chips. I can murder a basket of chips.
Nice.
But yeah.
Wow. It's good to know. Good to know. So then I want to understand about your master's and what you did during university, because it sounds quite intricate what you did.
Yeah, so what we were doing, we were working on, it was primatology, and it was based on a large, 25-year data set on these primates that had been studied in Tanzania. And so what happened, the research group of us, I think there was 6 of us, were basically tasked with analysing all this data, collating all this data, and then analysing it. And it's really interesting. We became, I guess, what you'd like to call leading experts in this particular statistical software that I don't think I'd even know where to start if I were to try it now. But back then, because I was immersed in it, that's what I was doing. But we were kind of on because it was research based and it was data analysis, we were pretty much left to our own devices.
Yep.
We ended up publishing a couple of papers on it and going to a couple of summits and things like that to present on it, which was really interesting. But so what happened then at the time is I was basically navigating doing that, and then also trying to make money, by this point I was in the gym, so I'm trying to put muscle on as young lads do, optimize my recovery and my growth, which I'm sure we'll get into. And yeah, so I was kind of spinning a few plates then. Yeah.
Because it sounds super, super interesting. But during that time, I want to sort of understand, when did you, as a young guy, obviously you were studying and doing your masters.
Yep.
And at the same time, you found the gym. Like most young men do, they want to sort of pile on the muscle and push the biggest weights possible.
Yes.
But when did you start to think, actually, I'm quite good at this and I want to understand about recovery, muscle and things like that? Because that led you on to your current path and your current job role.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question. What happened was I was that classic guy who was just going in lifting weights and not really paying any attention to recovery. I didn't really understand it then. But as you say, it came to me quite naturally. Like I didn't go at it. Now I approach it with a very academic mindset. And I like to be quite analytical and things like that. But back then I was the guy that I basically tell my clients not to be. I was that guy going in, throwing on ridiculous weights with bad form, ego lifting, all that kind of stuff. But even then, with all the mistakes that I was making, I was just genetically, I wouldn't say I'm in the genetic elite. The genetic elite are like your bodybuilders that get up on stage and stuff like that. Like they can just look at a weight and they'll look really good, But I guess I'd got better than above average genetics for the sport. So I was developing very quickly. I've always been naturally very lean. So having abs was never really an issue. I put on muscle fairly quickly. So that was a blessing and a curse. It was a blessing that I'd progressed very quickly, but I also didn't give me the respect for the other things until later on, until I started to get a few injuries, a few niggles,
right,
and stuff like that. Yeah.
So then, people might be, tuning in thinking, well, this is weird because Mike's not a chef. This is a foodie podcast. But, for people who don't know what you do, you are an elite coach, I would say, right? Now, there's a lot of terms that come with that, but just for if I was coming to you for the first time, what is it that you really do for me to really further understand it?
Right. So what I try to do with people that I coach is help them. Generally, I work with people who are successful in their career, and what's normally happens is that people put all their eggs in the career basket and leave little energy for the rest of their life, whether it's their health, their family, their social life, their hobbies, whatever it is. So my job, what I've developed, and I've coached all sorts of people over the years, but now I focus on like entrepreneurs, business owners, things like that, to help them use the same skills that they've used to build their careers, to build their businesses, use that same focus, consistency, single-mindedness towards their health and their fitness as well, and implementing logic over emotion. Right? Okay.
Because that sounds quite big, logic over emotion.
Yes.
Because, emotions are everywhere, unfortunately, especially when it comes to training and the job. So then typically, I would say, and I don't have much knowledge, but typically I would say most, let's say, coaches or personal trainers would either do it, whether it's a month, perhaps 3 months. How long do you coach your particular clients for?
That's a great question. And I coach people a minimum of 6 months. But generally, people stay with me 12 to 18 months. And the reason I coach people for so long, excuse me, is that the most simplistic way of saying it is, if you want results long term, you have to invest long term, right? a lot of people will go, oh, I just want to do this for a month or 90 days or whatever. It's like, well, do you only want your results for that? No, I want my results forever. Okay, well, we need to look at it with more of a long-term mindset then, and to start implementing things. So if you imagine if I say I'm working with someone who's coming to me after 10, 15, 20 years of bad habits, and they want to reverse all that in 90 days, I'll say, look, let's remove emotion from this. Is that a sensible assumption? Actually, no, like 3 months versus 10 years, it's going to be very difficult to reverse. So the longer we have to work on these things, to work on habit changes and routine changes, lifestyle changes, the more chance we've got of getting the results sustainable.
So then what I want to understand is, a year is a long time to train someone, to coach someone, to guide them through that sort of specific fitness, health and wealth sort of journey, let's say, because one of my practitioners in a resort where I used to work would literally say health is wealth. 100%. Because if you don't have your health, you have nothing. So I want to understand, the types of things that you would focus on. So for example, as we mentioned, energy, recovery, strength, body measurements, lifestyle choices, because again, the audience that we're talking to wouldn't, especially chefs, hospitality people, we are unfortunately not in the best shape at times due to our job, because we're givers, we love to give. So how do you sort of break each section down over that year with that client?
That's a great question. And what we do first off is, the very first thing I do with a client is establish what their goals are, and their big goals. And I use the term moonshot goals, right? So you've got little goals like, I want to lose a pound, I want to have less aches and pains or whatever. A moonshot goal would be, I've never had abs in my life, I'd like to have abs. Or I'd like to be able to run a 25-minute 5K, or I'd like to squat double my body weight, or stuff that they think that is miles away from what they could achieve currently, right? So we start with goal setting, and then it's implementing the small changes. And I like to use like another analogy, like a snowball, right? So I say, like, with a snowball, at the beginning, you have to put a lot of effort into it. Right? You have to build it up. You have to give it momentum, right? But once it gets to a certain size, it takes on a momentum of its own, right? So an example that I would give for you, for example, when you go into your job, you probably do 10, 15, 20 tasks that you don't even think about. You now do them automatically because you've been doing them for years and years, and they work, right? You've developed a strategy because it works. It gets you to your goal the quickest. I have to implement those slowly with a new client, but as it becomes habitual, okay, we add another one on. So suddenly they've gone from struggling with one or two to doing 10 or 15 new routines, new habits without even thinking about it.
So how often, let's say, are you sort of in touch with the clients, and how are you being analytical with their measurements, with what their intake, their lifestyle, all of that sort of stuff?
Right. So I'm very big on data. So, and that's why I say you'll hear me come a lot back to emotion versus logic, right? What we do to get better in anything is we collect data, right? All of us. And we keep what works. You'll do it in your job. People listening do it in their jobs. You keep what works. Excuse me. You keep what works, and you get rid of what doesn't. Right?
Okay. Because the other thing I was just sort of wanted to point out, and with previous sort of experience I've had with personal trainers, is that they'll be with you for perhaps that half an hour or an hour. And then you won't see them again for 3 days, or, so that's what I want to understand.
Yeah. How
often are you in touch with your clients to ensure that they're not being strict, but they're following the guideline in the beginning, let's say?
Yes. So you're absolutely right. So that's the thing. And online coaching, what I do working remotely, has kind of seen a huge surge really since, it was around before lockdown and COVID and stuff, but it took a big surge then, because people just couldn't get to personal trainers, but they wanted to stay in shape, or they realized that their health was regressing when they were locked down, right? And then you start to see the difference. So yeah, you like you said, you could go and see a personal trainer 1 hour or 2 hours a week, but outside of those 2 hours, you're left to your own devices, right? So no one's monitoring what you're eating, how you're sleeping, what your recovery is like, how your stress management is, all these fundamentals that go into the benefit in your exercise, right? So when I'm coaching, like you're asking me how much contact do I have with my clients, they've got access to me pretty much 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? So I will say we have our regular check-ins. There'll be a weekly check-in, but they can message me after workouts, like, because I want to make it fully bespoke. It has to work for them, right? So whether it's their workouts, whether it's their nutrition plan, whatever it is, they need that contact with me. They need to be able to ask questions, not just so they understand it, but also so they develop those skills, right? So let's say I'm working with you. If you ask me as many questions as you want, so you understand what I'm telling you, you then have, at the end of your 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, you then have the knowledge that you can take that forward. It's not going to be like, oh, I finished training with Mike in a few months' time, and what's going to happen then? Like, no, I understand what he's been teaching me. I've been asking questions,
Right.
so I now know what to do when he's not there, right? So that's what I say to people, is that the people who say, oh, I need someone in person, I need a personal trainer, I need someone to shout at me or to tell me what reps to do.
Right.
I'm like, okay, so when you go into work, you say, oh, I'm only going to work if the boss is standing over my shoulder and shouting at me. Of course you wouldn't, because you get your marching pace pretty quick, right? But that's what people say. They say, oh, I need someone. No, you don't. That's what you think you need, and that's potentially what you would prefer. But this isn't about what you would prefer. And that's not to say that it should be a miserable experience. What if you hold yourself back by saying, I want this? If you're trying to get to a goal that you don't know how to get to, and you start telling me, I know what works for me, or I would like this or whatever, then it's like, why do you need me?
Right. Okay.
Does that make sense?
100%. But I'm also, I want to get into the fundamentals a little bit later on. Excuse me. But the other thing that I think a lot of, or the misconception when you go to a gym, is that I've smashed myself in the gym for 90 minutes, whether it's cardio or weights, and then I can eat whatever I want, right? So how important is the nutrition factor when it comes to changing the bad habits, when it comes to shredding weight or feeling better or looking good? Because that's where I want to understand.
Yeah. So, well, you're in the right profession for it, right? In terms of understanding about food and things like that. But when it comes to body composition, if we look at body composition, let's keep it simple with body fat and muscle, right? Nutrition is the number one. It's number one. Like, if you can't wing it with nutrition. You can't go, I think I've burnt this many calories, so I'm going to go and consume this many, right? It's thermodynamics. It's simple science, right? So that's very, very common. People will go in and they'll go, oh, that was really difficult. Again, they think they implement emotion. That was really difficult. That made me really tired. This is how I feel. I am now going to self-medicate or self-prescribe X amount. I'm going to go and have a pizza, right? So if we just look at the basic numbers, the basic data, the hardest workout that you could do, and no one trains like this, right? But let's say you had the most horrific leg workout that someone could ever devise, and you went absolutely 100% balls to the wall, right? You would burn maybe 500 calories.
Okay.
If you went and had a pizza from a chain, you're looking at about 2,000 calories, right? So you're rewarding yourself from 500 calories with a 2,000 calorie food. You're now 1,500 calorie surplus. That equates to nearly half a pound of body fat.
Right.
So just that. Now, imagine how many people are rewarding themselves with food without that level of intensity, just after a whatever.
Yes, yeah.
They've had a stressful meeting or whatever.
Sure.
It's very difficult to say this to someone to get them to understand it when they're coming at it from an emotional standpoint.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, because I can imagine you get a lot of emotional eaters as well, or have had a stressful day at work. All sorts of things. So just for me to really understand it in a basic perspective. So if we put a pie chart, let's say, of 100%. When it comes to nutrition, what's the percentage of nutrition that you require for let's say, if I've split it into like I've got gym and then nutrition, right, and you've got pie chart is 100%, how would you split it?
And but what's the goal? Is the goal?
But let's say to stay nice and healthy, not to basically lose a huge amount of weight, but just to stay nice and healthy, for example.
Okay. So you're looking at 70% nutrition.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what I wanted to understand. So am I right in saying then, again, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, most people then will, without the level of analytics and training and expertise that you bring to the table, would then go to the gym, smash themselves, say, yes, I've got to the end of the week or whatever, and then go out on a Friday, Saturday night, have chips, curry, pizza, alcohol on top of that, and then all of that incredible work that they've done that week is essentially wasted. Is that correct?
That's pretty much spot on. Yeah. And so, and like I said, coming back to the emotion versus logic debate, you're to say that to someone who's worked really hard in the gym, or they've set time aside, they put a lot of effort in, and I were to say, well, you've wasted your time. Right? I wouldn't say it like that, but if someone's listening to that from an emotional standpoint, they're going to be very resistant. They're going to get even more emotional. They're going to get potentially bitter about it. Whereas it's just data. We're just looking at, you can do so, if you work really hard to be in a calorie deficit Monday through Thursday, but you go into a huge calorie surplus, which most people do Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it dwarfs any good work that you've done, right? But so many people struggle with this, right? Because they see food with emotion, as I'm sure you did. Like your things like food is memories, right?
Yes,
food
yes.
is, so it's understanding the impact. It's not saying we can't do it. Like we'll get onto stuff like I'm a fiend for donuts, right? In Spain, we've got a thing called churros, which is like, do you know them?
Of course, they're amazing.
Yeah.
Everybody
Incredible.
loves churros, man.
Yeah.
Especially with all the sauces, extra sugar.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I can imagine. And they're Moorish.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
People love them, right?
I go to Spain, right, and you've got churros and you've got a bigger version, called porras, right?
Right.
They're like twice the diameter.
Right? No way.
Oh, they're incredible. You're getting the old school, like in a brown paper bag.
Right.
And there's so much fat and grease that the bag's pretty much transparent by the time you get to finishing them. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I go and see this same, it's really nice setup in Spain when I go and visit over there, and it's this mum and son who've got a little trailer and they're just making them and banging up for peanuts. Like the money it's just like, I don't know, 50 cents a,
right. Yeah. Yeah.
and I get a bag of 6 and you say, who are you sharing it with? I'm not sharing it with anyone. This is for me. But then I did a video on it once saying like, this is over 1,000 calories. This is a snack essentially. This is over 1,000 calories.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was to say, right, I can have that. I can enjoy it, but I can't be ignorant to the fact that it's 1,000 calories. So I have to factor that in. I can't just say I deserve it. I'm going to treat myself or whatever, So it's just understanding the data.
Because I think that must be also the challenging part. If I think about it, also, you're guiding your clients. But I think what is really amazing is that over that year, and if they're being, fully transparent with you, say, okay, I'm going to go on holiday. I'm going to go for 2 weeks. I'm going to go to one of my favorite countries, and I'm going to do exactly what you just said. I'm going to be eating this and this and this. And, so how do you then factor that into sort of their lifestyle or their training and into the vacation? Because, you're not there to put a dampener on things, but you're also there to guide them, right? Because, they're paying clients.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So how do you factor that in?
It's interesting because you're absolutely right. Everyone has that mindset, right? You go on holiday, like, okay, let my hair down, gonna have fun, enjoy I'm in an amazing country, amazing food, stuff like that. I say, right, okay, well, first thing is if you want to, do you want to stay in shape long term, or do you just want to stay in shape? Like, are you happy getting out of shape when you're on holiday? Most people are actually, no, I don't want to get out of shape. I want to stay in shape. Like, okay, right. So we're going to enjoy it, but we have to implement some strategy here.
Okay.
Right? So I go, for example, if you go into, let's say Italy, I'm going to be going to generalize a lot here. Yeah. So you're going for Italy, and you really want to have pizza in the evening. Okay, fantastic, right? How can we pull back in the daytime, in the morning, the daytime, so we can allow for that indulgence at night? Yeah. Or they might want, some people might like the breakfast, and then we go, okay, how do we pull back on the other times?
Right.
Or how do we stay active? Because it might be you're going around, you're doing loads of sightseeing. So, okay, right, your steps are going to be here. You're roughly going to be burning X amount of calories. These are out. So we just develop those strategies. But going back to your original question, what I say to people is, like, if you want to stay in shape long term, we have to learn how to navigate those things. Otherwise, it's always one step forward, one step back, you know. And that's, apart from the fact that it's crushing on your confidence, on your resilience, on all stuff like that, it's also murder on your internal organs. If you're going from lean to overweight to lean to overweight to lean to overweight, you're going from clean food to like really rich, indulgent foods. You're putting a lot of pressure on your kidneys, a lot of pressure on your liver, all this stuff, right? So it's better to understand how can we do it so we still enjoy ourselves, but we're staying in shape. We're staying healthy.
So there is, you know, because some people might be like, oh, but this sounds very militant, but there is hope.
Of course,
it just means that, you know, you because I think, you know, if you worked so hard for 3, 4, 6 months or whatever to go on vacation to then just ruin yourself, what's the point?
Exactly.
Right? Because then all of that hard work's just essentially gone to waste in the bin, and then you have to start again almost. So then what I also want to understand is triggers of eating rubbish, let's say.
Yeah.
So again, I'm sure you get a lot of your clients sort of saying, well, I love to snack here, and I love to taste this, and I have to have a biscuit or a chocolate with the tea or a coffee, and we have a coffee break here, and right.
Yeah.
So how do you sort of, you know, navigate your way around that?
So really, really interesting. That one is, first off, we've all got habits and routines that we've done for years and years, right? And we're always resistant to change anything that we've done because we've developed, the answer we'll always give is, this is what works for me, or this is how I do things, but it's just, we've developed it, we like it, we don't want to change it, right? That's what that translates as, yeah? But a kind of funny way to explain this is, if someone comes to me and says, I'm really struggling with cravings, I can't stay away from the cookie jar, I'm always want something sweet after a meal, whatever.
Churros.
Exactly. Yeah. Because I'll hold my hands up and say that I like all that stuff. I'm not a robot.
Yeah.
But I just implement the data. Right. But the first question I'll ask is, how are you sleeping? And they'll go, no. Maybe you didn't hear. I'm struggling with cravings. I say, yeah. How are you sleeping? Right. So a lot of people don't understand that. I imagine quite a few listeners went, and hopefully this is helpful for them, is we've got, when we sleep, our hormones regulate, right? So we've got all sorts of, our hormones control everything, right? 2 particular hormones control our appetite. 2 hormones called leptin and ghrelin. One tells us we're full, one tells us we're hungry.
Which one's which?
So
leptin?
Leptin and ghrelin.
Ghrelin, okay. Yeah. So because I want to understand it.
Yeah.
Okay. So these 2 are basically the ones that are in control of our cravings?
They influence our cravings.
They influence, okay.
Yeah. Right. So they're basically telling our brain when we're full or when we need to eat.
Okay, got you.
So when we're not sleeping, they're all out of control, right? So if you're not sleeping right, your appetite's going to be out of control. Like, you could be doing everything. You could be exercising fantastically. You could be drinking enough water. You could be managing your stress. But if you're not sleeping properly, you're going to be hungry all the time. Not only are you going to be hungry, so I can see your face. Not only are you going to be hungry, but you're going to crave the worst stuff possible. You're going to crave high sugar, high salt, high hyperpalatable foods. So it's not like a lot of people beat themselves up for lack of discipline. Yeah. They'll be like, I can't stay away from the biscuits. I can't stay away from the crisps. I can't stay away from the fizzy drinks. And it's because of this. It's because of a sleep issue rather than a discipline issue.
Wow. So, because that's really interesting. If I put it in hospitality terms, fundamentally we work 12 to 18 hours a day, right? And we would get a good night's sleep is 5 hours for us, right? So 5.
Yeah. So I'm already twitching. That makes me cringe.
Yeah. And a bad night's sleep would be 3 hours. So what would that do to a human? I want to understand the effects of working so long, really, and essentially, and I'll just paint the picture for you. During that day, you're tasting, but you're not eating meals, and then you've got. I'll be nice. So let's say you've had 4 hours sleep. So what does that do to your entire sort of system?
Right. So I guess it's very common in your industry, right? And
yes.
I would say, really, anyone who's listening, really pay attention to this because it's so important. But basically, when we sleep, our body resets. Not only our body resets, our brain resets, right? So there's some really good stuff out there that I recommend clients to read and clients to listen to. But in layman's terms, if you're not allowing your body to reset and your brain to reset, you're starting on the back foot each day. And to get yourself up to baseline, you're going to start craving or start telling yourself you need certain things. So caffeine's a big one, right? So if you're really tired, you just end up running on loads of caffeine.
Yeah.
What that does, if you start having loads of caffeine, that's going to mess with your blood pressure, mess with your heart rate, mess with all these things. You're not going to be able to regulate your own energy properly, right? And it just becomes that negative snowball. Remember what I told you before about the positive snowball? Yeah. We've got a negative snowball, right?
Right.
Then things like, okay, my dopamine's really low. I can't regulate my, what's the word? Happy hormones.
Yes, yeah.
Right? So how do I get myself happy? Sugar, alcohol, other stuff.
Right.
So it all starts to compound, right? There's also, and I'm not trying to scare anyone, but some really good, I'd say 2 really good books on this: Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, and Life Force by Tony Robbins, and they talk about not only the benefits of sleep, but also the pretty significant negative consequences of consistently poor sleep.
Okay.
Right. So, and one of the things that Matthew Walker says is that a sleep of 5 hours or less can age you 10 years. Like if you're consistently doing that, it can age you 10 years. Because your brain and your body isn't able to reset, your hormones aren't able to regulate. And then again, not trying to be a doomsday prophet, but this is just the data that says that there's consistent low sleep is associated with neurodegenerative diseases,
right?
Like Alzheimer's, like dementia, all that stuff. So it's about going, right, how can we get good quality sleep? And there's like, and I'm sure people listening to this, they'll probably be like, oh yeah, I do supplement with a lot of caffeine. I do find myself being drawn to sugary stuff. I do need alcohol to wind down, all this stuff. This has all happened as a result of poor sleep in most cases.
Right. Because I want to go back to the cravings part.
Yes.
So if again, theoretically, I followed your advice, I'm getting, a good solid 7 to 8 hours sleep. Mm-hmm. So you're telling me that the cravings would then sort of reduce?
Yes. There is an element of, for example, let's say I have a croissant every morning at 10 a.m. and that's been your habit for a year,
right?
Let's say,
yeah.
Right. Even with good sleep, you're going to fight against that habit because your body is used to a certain amount of sugar and fat going in at that time.
And
there's gonna
triggers.
Exactly. There's
Right.
going to be, but there's going to be a physiological response. There's going to be an insulin response that goes to that. That sugar going in, that sugar does make you feel good. It creates but what happens is it creates a dopamine spike, but then the insulin released brings that down. So it brings your blood sugar into acceptable levels. So it's no longer dangerous, right? But that crash leads you wanting more, right? So I'm trying not to deviate from your question too much, but it's like you'll have less cravings, but there is a certain amount of gritting through it. If you've got a habit,
Sure.
and I say, right, we need to eliminate that croissant, it's not going to be sunshine and rainbows. There will be a couple of days where it sucks, but it's going to suck less with good quality sleep.
But could you potentially then, would you know, if somebody was a croissant holic, right? and they had it every morning with their coffee, and it was they have to have it. Would you then, is it okay to then say, look, okay, let's, instead of having 7 days a week, have it 3 days a week? Mm-hmm. So it's slowly, gradually, let's say,
it all depends on, we work on the person, right? And it depends on what their goals are. For example, if they've got a big fat loss goal and they want to do it, let's say they've had a health scare.
Yes.
A bad doctor's report.
Right.
It's like, okay, we don't have time to mess around.
Okay.
We need to start eliminating stuff.
Got you.
And we've got to get the biggest bang for our buck.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it might be like, okay, we need to keep the meal structure good, but we don't need these croissants, double espressos, things like that. Like, they're negligible. They're not doing anything for our body composition. They're just feeding our emotions. Right. Funny story about that is one of my early clients in the early days, right? Her husband at the time was a pastry chef, right? So she would eat croissants, pain au chocolat, like he would feed her up like...
Yeah, so he would bring home the goods.
Exactly, right? Exactly. And I was salivating listening to this, like, oh, this sounds amazing, But she had a health scare. We had to bring her body fat down and things like that. But, a couple of weeks in, she was like, Mike, I'm really worried. I said, well, what do you mean? She goes, I think you might have given me a stomach ulcer. And I'm early in my career, right? So I'm like, oh my God, what are you talking about? Like,
right.
And you start thinking, am I doing the wrong thing? Am I making people sick? But to give you an idea, she was so habituated to this stuff that she was basically going cold turkey. So she was getting headaches. She was getting stomach cramps. She was getting stomach pains, right? And it was just withdrawal symptoms.
That was all it was.
That's all it was. Yeah. And once she got through that, she had to go through a very, very rough patch. But after that, the cravings had gone completely. So that was like an extreme version of someone who was really, really habituated to it, like just didn't even think about the pastries and the sugar and stuff they were taking in until that was removed. And because we had to do it in quite a abrupt way.
Yes.
The side effects were quite abrupt.
Sure. No, but I can imagine that if you are told that you have a health scare and you have to change your lifestyle, of course, it's going to be challenging anyways, but what would you rather have? Another hardcore health scare or, get your health back?
Yeah. Well, you think like logically, we think, of course, you want your health back. But this is where it comes back to the logic versus emotion debate. Like when you're so emotionally invested in whatever it is, whatever your vice is, people can find it, even if they're faced with like some very, very negative potential outcomes.
Yes.
That's how powerful it can be. So I'm not saying it like tongue in cheek when I'm saying people really struggle with their emotions or their habits. Like they're really, really ingrained. So it's given that the respect it deserves. But also people need to accept that, okay, right, I'm in the trenches from this habit that I've developed over the years. I have to accept the fact that I'm there and I have to work to get out of it.
So then if I go back to then, once a client is officially on board with you, I also want to understand the piece about, honesty. Yeah. Because if they've never met you before, and they've sort of come through different friends, or whatever it may be, you've been highly recommended, so on and so forth. How intrusive, and I don't mean that in a sort of offensive way, but how intrusive do you need to be in order to get those sort of changes done? Because I'm sure it's quite easy for a few clients to say, yeah, I'm sticking to my nutrition plan, and then the weight is going up or staying the same. And you're doing the check-ins, and did you do anything over the weekend? No. Yeah, okay. But on your Instagram, you went to Ibiza.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I want to understand that piece. Is in the beginning, how do you lay those things down for your clients?
Pretty much, yeah. So luckily, I've had a lot of people come to me saying, you're known for your no bullshit approach,
right?
And that's what I need. So luckily, a lot of people know that about me already. But when I have an initial call with someone, I'll say, okay, what are your goals? And like I said, if someone says to me, I just want to lose 5 pounds, or I just want to drop a waist out, I'm like, I'm not the coach for you.
Okay.
Like, we're talking lifestyle stuff.
Right.
We're talking life-changing stuff. If you're going to work with me and put up with me for 6 months, because I'm no day at the beach, I'm going to tell you how it is, right? We have to be able to work together closely, right? Aside from that, let's say that they don't pay attention to that. I'll also, for example, get them a fitness tracker that monitors their sleep.
Right.
All their sleep data comes through to me, so I know they don't need to tell me that.
Okay.
I can see it.
Brilliant.
Right. So, for example, if they've had an alcoholic drink, and they tell me they haven't, I'll say, "Oh, your sleep data tells me different."
Right.
Same with the food. Like I like to say, like, if we're developing this relationship, you have to be honest with me. You have to tell me, let's work together to make this, to build this plan that works for you, right? But kind of to what you said, if they're saying, well, I've done everything that you've said and my weight's going up, I'm like, well, it's scientifically impossible.
Yeah.
So I'm not your parent, right? If you want to tell me porkies, you can, but this is just going to drag out this, where other people might be getting results in a month. You might have to wait until you decide to be honest with me.
Sure.
It might cost you 3, 4, 5 months. Have you got that time and have you got that money to waste?
Yeah.
By telling fibs,
right?
It's up to you.
No, but I think that's extremely important because and we've all done it. Which, oh yeah, I did this, and so because I think the benefit to having a coach like yourself is the fact that you're not doing it for a short term. You're doing it for a long term, and in that 6 months to a year, you as the client, you're going to learn a huge amount of things about yourself, and also I think the personal training and this health lifestyle and wellness is for me especially, I think it should be a long-term thing, right? Because we all want to grow old gracefully and still want to be able to walk and lift toddlers or whatever it may be, or just do a basic thing like going to the shops and carrying bags, right?
Exactly.
Because for us, we take it for granted, but when you're 70, 80, can you still do that? So I think that's really important. But then if we draw this conversation back to the chefs and hospitality, and then you're coming, a client is coming to you within the realms of hospitality, I can imagine that can be quite challenging.
Yes.
Because absolutely. As you said, you've had clients who their husbands were pastry chefs, so on and so forth. So how would we, and let's say I'll take myself as an example, if you were to work with me and, I'm on my feet for most of the day, I'm tasting throughout the day, how would you be able to sort of work with me and ensure that I'm staying semi-healthy, working out, but I'm still having to do my job?
Yeah, great question. And what I say is, initially we go through absolutely everything.
Right.
We go, okay, what are the challenges? Well, because you've said some things there that are beneficial. For example, if you're on your feet all day, you're burning more calories than someone who's sat down like we are now, and sat at a desk, which a lot of guys struggle with being sedentary, right? So you're being active, right? But then you've got the flip side to that you're tasting stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So then I'll say, okay, right, James, like, what is essential tasting? And then describe to me what tasting is. Is tasting a teaspoon? Is tasting a mouthful? is tasting a handful of something, like give it, and it might seem like I'm being really like nitpicky, but the more data I have, the more I can go, and I'll just be very honest with you and say, okay, is that essential? Is that essential? If someone comes and says, oh, James, I'd like you to try this wine, or I'd like you to taste this, you know, I think you were judging a burger contest recently, right?
Yeah.
So there's a big difference between tasting one burger and tasting 20 burgers.
Yes.
Right. So we go, right, okay, what is the minimum, how do we mitigate the damage?
Gotcha.
We understand that there's certain requirements of your job, but how do we mitigate it? And a lot of times, again, coming back to that emotional thing, emotional responses, I have to taste everything, I have to do that. But sometimes you might be like, actually, again, I'm not going to pretend I know your job. You might be like, I don't need to take a whole tablespoon.
Sure.
I can just dip a teaspoon.
Yeah.
Or I can get my
sous chef
number two.
Number two, yeah.
I can get him to do some of that,
right.
you know, or say, you know, we won't tell him he's going to get fat. We'll just make sure we stay lean, right? No, but you know,
Sure,
what I mean?
yeah, I'm with you.
So strategies. Because when you just go, okay, black and white, okay, well, I can't get in shape because I have to taste everything all day, or I can't get in shape because I've got to try all these different wines or whatever it is. Then, so that's why we have that kind of back and forth.
Right.
And I need to know your challenges.
Okay.
We navigate it, and then I say to you, right, do you think this is feasible? You might say, I can do that and that. I can't do that. Okay, right. Then we have data. Then we can build from that.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Because I just think with what we've discussed, I think there's a lot of people currently going, well, there's no way that, I can be trained. But actually there is,
of course,
and very much just like what you said about the vacation, it's sort of, you're doing your tasting, but is it necessary, the levels of tasting, so on and so forth. But then the other one that I wanted to understand is, what are your sort of, and the most common challenges you get from your clients? And I'll give you a specific one that I think we're suffering from. Everyone in the world seems to think that, and they love, and they put it on Instagram everywhere, poached eggs with avocado and toast and sourdough and all of that kind of stuff. So I want to first of all talk about fats. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I want to talk about sort of the very specific hurdles, or the most common hurdles you hear your clients sort of talk about when it comes to food.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, first of all, I want to talk about the fats, because what I want to understand, what's a good fat and a bad fat. I'm talking about avocado because everyone seems to think that avocado is like the most healthiest thing in the world.
Yeah,
and it might be, but I have no idea how many calories are in an avocado.
Yeah,
no idea.
Yeah.
So let me know.
Yeah, so that's brilliant. Yeah, because I tell you what, I don't mind avocado. For me, it doesn't really taste it too much.
Right.
Like, I'm so sick of people saying that it, but it's healthy. It's healthy fats. So you raise a fantastic example there. Is like, if we just start with the boring data, right? You've got 3 macronutrients. You've got protein. You've got carbohydrates. You've got fats.
Okay,
right?
so that's macronutrients.
Macronutrients,
right? Okay.
Yeah. Per gram, protein and carbohydrates are 4 calories per gram. Fats are 9 calories per gram.
Fats.
Yeah. So more than double, right? So we're talking things like avocados, nuts, oils, butters, things like that.
All
right?
the good stuff.
All the good stuff.
Yeah, double cream.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, you got the data there. Like,
right.
Anything that you're having that's high in fat is going to be double the calories, right? Pretty much. So a lot of people like to jump on that. Oh, but it's healthy fats, but it's good fats, but it's whatever, classic example, right? And you might have to rein me in here with all my examples, but I'm Spanish, right? Or half Spanish. When I go to Spain, they'll knock up these beautiful salads, right? And then once they've done a salad, they get the bottle of olive oil, hope this lid's on, and they go,
right.
Like that. And I'm like, do you realize how many calories you've just put in that salad? You've just turned that salad that was negligible calories, if it's all veggies, into a pizza or into a takeaway.
That many?
Yeah. So we're looking at
Wow.
100 calories per tablespoon of olive oil. And you think about how many go into just you know.
Right.
People don't like to hear that. So
Yeah.
I remember saying that to my auntie and my dad, and the response wasn't a happy response. Because they think they're being good making a salad, right?
Right.
But they're covering it in fat.
Because there's so much information out there, though, isn't there? You know.
Oh, yeah.
And there's you know, certain health gurus, let's say, that would recommend that you have a tablespoon of olive oil first thing in the morning, with you know, nothing straight in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I imagine that you get some incredible health benefits, but also it depends on, you know, what era you're in, whether you're trying to get fit or not. So that's a really good example. And equally with the avocados, is it a good fat? Is it a bad fat? How many calories?
It is a good fat, but I don't like using the term good fats and bad fats, because people then, when they say a good fat, their emotion takes over. They stop looking at the data,
Right.
and they forget that it's still 9 calories per gram. It's still twice as much as a carbohydrate or a protein. So as humans, we like to be vindicated for what we like. Right?
Yes.
So if we like avocado and we hear someone say, it doesn't matter if it could be a child. If we ever hear a child say, but it's good fats, thank you. I'll take that information. So I can have this because it's good fat.
Right.
You know? But nuts are good for you. Nuts are good for your brain. Yeah, but that handful of nuts is the same as a massive bowl of potatoes, for example. You know, that's how
Got you.
not all calories are created equal, right?
Yes, yeah.
So yeah, you look at things like trans fats, you know, like you know, the stuff that's in confectionery, you know, there's certain, you know, seed oils aren't good for you. You know, there are a lot of fats that are bad for you, and there's some fats that are better. You know, to get good quality fats from nuts, from salmon, from avocado, from olive oil, right? But again, if you're wanting to stay lean, you're wanting to stay healthy, you need to keep your calories under control.
Right.
So your body doesn't, and this is how it sounds like I'm picking fun at people, but if you go into a calorie surplus, which is more calories than you need, the excess calories get stored as body fat. Your body doesn't go, oh, but those excess calories, they came from a salmon fillet, and that's good fat. So we're gonna give you a pass, and we're not gonna put on body fat, right? You're still in the calorie surplus,
Right.
So avocado, whatever. So they are good fats, but they're still fats. They're still calories. You know?
So, and when it comes to calories, for people who don't necessarily understand that word or the world of calories, on average, let's say for the average man and the average woman, so and I'm not talking about whether you're fit or not, just on average, let's say, what is the daily consumption of a man versus a woman on a daily basis, let's say?
I'd say, you know, and they do have the daily guidelines on a lot of foodstuffs, right? So it would be around the 2,000 calorie mark for men, women a bit lower, maybe 1,600 calories,
right?
You know, but if we compare that to certain things that we like, I don't know, I'm going to put you on the spot now. Like, pick a food that you really like or you think that's really popular.
Fish and chips.
Fish and chips. Okay, right. So think about how the fish and chips are made, right? Both of them are deep fried, a lot of batter. You're probably knocking on the door of 1,600 calories. You're probably knocking on the door of a woman's total daily allowance in that meal.
Just in that meal.
Depending on the size, obviously, and stuff like that. And especially if you start adding the good stuff like the scraps and the curry sauce or whatever it is. Yeah. So again, it's going, right, okay, what's the best use of calories? If I'm going to take in 1,600 calories in one meal, am I able to not eat for the rest of the day? And if not many people would be able to do that. But if they were, okay, that's my only meal. How much protein am I getting from that? What's the vitamin profile like? Am I getting the things that are going to stop me getting sick? Am I going to get the electrolytes? I don't want to go into too much detail.
Sure.
But there's things that we need for our body to run right that you're not going to get in a lot of this stuff, right? So it's going, right, how do I? And there's a hunger element as well, right? So we want to be satiated. We want to be full. We don't want to experience that hunger where we're more reactive. but we also want to hit our targets and make sure, okay, if a man wants a muscular physique, he needs a certain amount of protein. If he doesn't want to get sick, he needs a certain amount of vitamins.
Right.
If he doesn't want to cramp, he needs a certain amount of electrolytes. So yeah, I'm trying not to make it sound too complicated, but there's a lot that goes into it.
No,
right?
absolutely. But then the other question was, what are the most sort of top 3 common gripes or complaints that, your regulars would say about their habits?
So I guess the main one is just being defensive about what they like, right? So I have let's use the avocado as an example. I eat avocado on toast because it's good fats. Right?
With the croissant.
Exactly. Yeah. The avocado cancels out the croissant, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But you get when people are emotional, they come up with these kind of rationale, right? So it's going, okay, but what's your goal? And if you say to them, okay, fat loss is my goal, how many calories are in that avocado on toast? I don't know. All right, well, let's use another example. If you were trying to save X amount of money in a month, but you're not looking at your income and your expenditure, how are we gonna track that? How are we gonna track that? Are you just leaving it up to chance? Just going, I really, really hope I've got more money at the end of the month. Or are you gonna pull back on what you're spending, and try and increase your income, right? It's just data. So, but common ones are saying that they need alcohol to get over a stressful day.
Right, we'll talk about that.
That grinds my gears.
Yeah, okay.
Saying they need something sweet after a meal. I don't get so annoyed by that because that's a habitual thing. Sure. A lot of people have dessert.
Yes,
right? Have dessert after food. But it's when they say they need it, right?
Right.
None of us need anything.
Right,
yeah?
right.
And I'm hungry. So to give you an idea, there was one point where I'm going to sound like a dictator here, and I promise I'm not. Only a little bit. So I had a group, like a community. My clients made up a community. This was a few years ago in lockdown.
Right.
So I had a lot of online clients, and we were doing a lot of kind of community-based stuff, right? And I was getting sick to death of people telling me they were hungry and stuff. And I'm saying, you're not hungry, you're bored, which is something we can get onto. I said, right, we're all fasting for 24 hours because you're telling me you can't go 2 hours without going to the fridge. We're going to do a 24-hour fast, right? And out of all those people that were crying and moaning and saying, all of them went past 24 hours. We had a load that went past 36, and we had 3 that went, only 1 got to 48, but 3 got over 40 hours. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I was just saying, right, okay, so you were saying that you couldn't make it between breakfast and lunch for that. It's just gaining a little bit of perspective. Now,
yes.
Obviously, I'm not, what's the word?
No, but you're right. I think you're absolutely right. Is during lockdown, I mean, that was the only thing to do, wasn't it, really? Is you're constantly looking in your fridge, because people were bored.
Yeah.
Right? Which I think is incredibly interesting.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I can imagine also, once you've gone past 6, 8, 10 hours is amazing, but 24 hours, I think it's phenomenal. And to do it as a community.
Yeah.
So did they all thank you in the end?
They did, and it started getting competitive. As it started going past 24 hours, you start seeing these people turning into savages, and they're like, I'm going to beat that person, or I'm going to beat, and, it was all done very, very safely. And it was like, okay, whenever your first meal is, this is the strategy for the first meal. The first meal has to be, as much as you might be craving fish and chips or a bowl of ice cream or whatever, the first meal has to be full of vitamins, full of electrolytes, full of things that your body is craving.
Okay.
Right. So a good salad is a good example. Whack on plenty of protein on the salad, but let's get a salad niçoise or
Gotcha.
Something like that. As the first meal. After that, if you want a pizza, you want cookies, you can do whatever. But get the stuff that your body needs, because your body's basically been neglected that stuff for a certain amount of time. Yeah.
The other thing which I want to sort of talk to you about, Mike, is so we've discussed about the role of sleep and how important it is. But the other one is, and we don't talk about it much, but I think it's a massive one, is the role of exercise, wellness, and mental health. Because I think, so I've seen a couple of clips, I've talked to quite a few people as well, and they've basically said like they need to do exercise and to do any sort of exercise, that whether it's golf, whether it's going to the gym physically, running, paddle, whatever it is, they need to do some sort of exercise in order to stop being mental. And I think that's a really interesting point, that how does the role of fitness and wellness sort of play into mental health with your clients?
That's a great question, and I'll kind of preface that with giving your listeners and yourself the 5 fundamentals of health and fitness, right? And if you want to keep good control over everything, so you've got your exercise, you've got your nutrition, you've got your sleep and recovery, you've got your hydration, and you've got your stress management, and they're all linked, right? So as I start to answer this, you'll start to notice that there's connections here and there, right? So let's go with mental health, right? So I'll give the example of someone who's really stressed at work, right? They're really stressed. They've got a hormone called cortisol, right? Your stress hormone, you've heard of that, right?
Oh, yes.
Go through the roof, yeah? If you're not bringing that down with good quality sleep, then your stress is higher, which is going to bring your mood down, right? And the unfortunate thing is that the higher it is, the more difficult it is for you to sleep properly. So it becomes like a downward spiral, right? So you really need to take action on it, yeah? But when it's high, that means that it's impacting your other kind of like your mood hormones and things like that. So that's going to bring you down further, yeah? And then if you're neglecting, going back to what you said about exercise, that's one of the best ways to eliminate that.
Right.
So you go into the gym, you get aggressive, you throw some weights around, or you put a hard workout in, and I'd say there it's much more important to do weights and resistance training than it is to do cardio training. Right. Research has stated that actually hard cardio can actually compound the effect of cortisol and doesn't really benefit too much.
Right.
You really want to be doing resistance training.
Got you.
But do you see how they're all linked there? So cortisol then can affect your sleep, which then can affect your hormones, which will affect your appetite, which affects your nutrition. So it's so important to be aware of that stuff and go, right, okay, where are the fundamentals that I can start to tighten up on to feel better? So I'm really stressed with work. Okay, can I get to the gym and just throw some weights around and really just kind of relieve that aggression? And then that benefit from that is going to make you tired, hopefully make you sleep better. When you sleep better, have more control of your appetite and stuff like that. So I hope that answered your question.
No,
but
100%.
Let me know if it didn't.
No, 100%, because I just think I never thought about it in that respect, to have those 5 fundamentals in place. Because, again, and I'll throw it back to the kitchen, chefs might or might not be known for being stressed. I don't know, but they're in, especially what I would say or call the Formula One kitchens. The top end kitchens in the world specifically. They run at a very high level of stress, whether it's screaming or shouting in the kitchen or not. It's about that pressure, right? And chefs don't really sort of, when they're working those hours in that relentless pace, they're not sort of sleeping and the cortisol. So I totally understand where that's coming from. But also in terms of, on the other perspective is, yes, when you're throwing the weights around or you're doing your workout, you're sort of almost getting rid of all of that. Yeah. And then, you feel much better, right? So then, if I go into a vice that a lot of us have, not just chefs, but people all over the world, is the role of alcohol and what that plays into health. Because, again, some studies previously have said, a glass of red wine every day is very, very good for you. A glass of whiskey every day is good for you. However, when you're trying, again, to get in shape, when you're trying to go on some sort of health journey, you go back, you do Monday through to Friday, you have a great one, you're teetotal, and then Friday, Saturday night, you get completely...
The wheels come off.
Yeah, the wheels come off, exactly.
Yeah.
Especially in this culture, you go for a brunch or whatever it may be, there's alcohol everywhere. What are the long-term effects of alcohol on wellness and nutrition and overall?
So with alcohol, I understand that it's a bit of a hot potato because a lot of it's a big part of social culture, right? So coming back to what I do, my job is just I'm not here to tell people what to do, right? I'm just to present the data that they might not know, right? But you raise a great point in that someone somewhere probably once said a glass of red wine a day is good for you, right? But if we remember back when cigarettes used to be advertised, I think doctors used to recommend smoking like years and years and years ago.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 40s, 50s, yes.
As the knowledge improves and the data improves and stuff like that. But another example, like I said about the avocado, if someone hears something that corroborates what they enjoy, what they like, we're not going to talk about what works for them, even though that's what they say. They don't say, I really like this. They say, well, this works for me. This is what I do, right? Again, it comes back to that emotion thing. See how it all stems back to that? So if people like drinking, they're going to find a reason to do it. Yeah. So my job is to go to present the data, right? So I'll use the World Health Organization. People have got different views on that, but they've stated that not a single drink is beneficial for, like, any drink that you have is
Alcoholic.
Yeah, any alcoholic drink that you have has a negative impact on health.
Right.
So the way that I present it to clients is say, look, if we look at alcohol in its raw form, right, in its pure form, it's ethanol. Like, if you drank that, it would kill you, right? So you're taking in a toxin that your body can't process, okay? So it's been through manufacturing and all stuff like that, it's been created in doses that the body can. Like, the liver still has to work hard. And when your liver is working hard, other things can't work properly. So you can't get good quality sleep if you're having a drink. And unfortunately, I wish I had better news, but that can be just one drink. You have a glass of wine with dinner, you're not going to get a good night's sleep, right? And it's not, you might be like, well, that's not the end of the world. Okay, but what's the compound effect, right? So you have a bad night's sleep. The next day, appetite's out of control. You're weak in the gym. You've got brain fog, stressed at work. All those other nasties start going up, right? It's not the alcohol itself that's good. It's the knock-on effect. It's like that first domino. Yeah. Right. But yeah, if you're going out and haven't gone to a brunch until you can't walk, then you're gonna that effect is gonna get really compounded, right? And then you're putting pressure on your kidneys, your liver. Your body is having to work really hard to eliminate that toxin. So yeah, like I said, I actually really like, for example, someone with your knowledge of wine and whiskey and stuff like that. Like I really admire that. I think that's a really interesting skill, right? So I'm not here to vilify alcohol and say you can never drink. It's just to give you the data that has. Like yeah.
So then if we put it into context and say, look, Mike, I've been working really hard, over the past week. However, on a Saturday night, I want to have a date night with the missus. What can I have? What would you recommend me to have? And also, is it the type of alcohol? Mm-hmm. So, for example, beer and Guinness, for example, is super calorific. Mm-hmm. Or do you recommend me, if I'm going to have a drink of alcohol, is it a wine? Is it a whiskey? So how would you sort of attack that for your clients?
Great question. So a couple of things that play there. One, if you're going to drink, then we go, okay, right, what's the long-term goal, right? How do we mitigate the damage, or how do we keep your goal in line? So let's say it's a fat loss goal. We look at what is most calorific. Okay, wine, cocktails, beer, stuff like that.
Okay.
So if it was just about keeping the calories under control, say, okay, right, things like good quality spirits, like either neat or with a diet Coke, soda, whatever it is, a diet mixer.
Sure.
So to give you an idea, gin and, slimline, you're looking at less than 100 calories. You're looking a pint of beer, you're knocking on the door of, or a cocktail, let's say, easier, you're looking 200, 300, 400 calories, some of them.
Right.
Yeah. I remember saying this to a former client about espresso martinis. She goes, I had 5 espresso martinis yesterday. I said, okay, right, you drank more calories than you ate that day.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not just, obviously I had to break it to not just the horrible headache that you've got,
Yeah.
but you've also taken in a shitload of calories.
Wow.
Yeah. But again, that's just the data. If people want to go out and have a good time, fine. And then the other thing I would say to clients is, what is the goal here? So if you're like, I'm being presented with a really nice bottle of red, I'd love to try it. You know much more about wine than I do. That's fine. Like, have a glass of wine. You got to decide whether you're drinking for the effect of the alcohol. So you're drinking to get drunk. You're drinking for that giddy feeling where you're kind of a little bit inebriated, or very inebriated.
When people say they need.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I need to cool
Take
off
the edge off or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or no, this is a really good whiskey that I want to try. This is a really nice, but I'm like, okay, well, you don't need more than one glass then.
Right. So it's just about the trial, same as the tasting in a way.
Exactly. So it's just being honest with yourself about what the goal is, what your long-term goal is, and then what the goal of that night is. Right. So if you want to get drunk, just be honest with yourself about getting drunk. So what I would say is, if you're going to get drunk, or you're going to have a few drinks, go for the lower calorie options. So we're not going crazy on the calories, as well as the damage from the damage on the sleep.
But then the few hours afterwards, or the morning afterwards, when you're having your 3 Big Macs because you're super hungry and you're craving. Do you know what? Yeah. So that's the thing, is that you have to really weigh things up. But also I think it's important to have someone like yourself to go, okay, look, if you want to go for it, no issues, but just understand this is what you need to do, this is what you require, so on and so forth. The breakfast or the next day, just make sure you have X, Y, Z.
Exactly. Yes.
And then you need to get back on the horse straight away.
That's what I say to clients, is say, right, if you know you're going to go out for a night out, or you've got a brunch or something, have good stuff in the house, right? So I'm going to turn the spotlight back on you and put you under this and ask you here. So you said about the cravings the next day. Like, why is that craving? If you've drunk the night before and then you've got cravings the next day, why is that? It's the appetite hormones are out of control because you haven't slept properly. Right. So people will say, oh, I don't know why I need a fry up the next day, or I'm really hungry the next day. You're not. There's nothing that you've done that makes you hungrier, right? It's the poor sleep. If you had dinner as you normally do before you went out versus a day that you were sober, you've still had the same amount of calories, right? Nothing's there making you hungrier. It's the fact that you've had a poor night's sleep and your appetite hormones are out of control.
Because I just think those decisions, those micro decisions, make such a big impact.
Massive.
Where and it's, eating correct, okay, fine. Getting the correct sleep, making sure that you're not, and again, it just sort of takes me back to those 5 fundamentals of trying to get everything right. And it's not going to be easy, right, Mike? There's going to be peaks and troughs during that whole year, but it's just sort of understanding that. But the other one that I want to sort of also discuss is a word that we hear about a lot, which is longevity. Right, so people talk about longevity because in the moment, people go, yeah, I've been training for the past 6 months, blah blah blah, but I don't think many people, and again, tell me if I'm wrong, think about the 10, 20, 30 years down the line of their actions. Yeah, so my dad, bless him, he loved to drink. When he was obviously 20, And then that sort of progressed until he passed, unfortunately. But he was told about his actions, they would lead to that demise. He was like, yeah, it didn't listen to it. And unfortunately, it just got progressively worse. So I want to also talk about that. When you're with your clients, is that something that they talk about, their long-term health, having to pick up their grandkids, doing the shopping, maybe going out for a bike ride or a hike. Do they talk about that?
The kind of guys, it's really interesting because the kind of men that I work with now they're generally, most of them are over 40, generally over 30, and they're starting to be more aware of that stuff. Generally, when, I'm sure you remember, like when you're in your 20s, and when I was in my 20s, the longevity was the furthest thing from my mind. I'm going to live forever.
Yeah.
And I'm going to live forever on a diet of Stella. Stella and nights out.
Yeah. And a beautiful kebab.
Exactly. Yeah. Top quality nutrition.
Yes.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right. I think when it becomes apparent, like they can't keep up with their kids when they want to play football, or they're struggling to lift the kids, or like you said, just carry shopping, or
even get out of a chair
exactly without making noises.
Yeah.
Or they've just got these aches and pains, and I don't know where these aches and pains have come from.
Right.
It's like, okay, right, well, we need to work to reverse this. But yeah, I think longevity is more it's more known about now, it's more spoken about, which I think is great, but it still needs, I think, a lot of focus. And a couple of things we touched on there, like with sleep and with alcohol, the more knowledge around that and how that can benefit longevity, the better for everyone,
But again, also I think it's about having that sort of extensive analytical knowledge,
exactly,
and really understanding, okay, what can I do, this, that, and the other.
Mm-hmm.
Because the other thing is, I find a lot is that in an industry such as yours, when and I'm talking about health and wellness overall, there is, for me, a ridiculous amount of information and misinformation.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very tricky bridge to cross.
Very tricky, yeah.
So for yourself, again, how do you sort of, give that genuine guidance to your clients, and also for people who potentially, want to be clients for yourself?
Mm-hmm. So that's really, really interesting because, and without trying to downplay my role, my career, right? The benefit that you will get from me as your coach, it is an information, right? And I'm not saying that I won't give you information. All I'm saying is there's nothing that I can tell you that you won't find if you search hard enough and long enough on Google or ChatGPT, whatever,
sure. Yeah.
right? Where my value comes in is accountability and experience, right? So you want to learn from someone who's been where you want to be and can teach you that authentically. They've authentically been there. They know what it feels like. They know how to get there. They've done it with multiple people before, right? They know the blueprint.
Yeah.
You can waste 10 years trying to, excuse my French, but I like this word, trying to bumblefuck it yourself. Or you can hire someone who's been there, won that, and will show you, more importantly than showing you the way there, is showing you the mistakes to avoid.
Okay.
Right? And then accountability, like you said, will all forfeit. Like you said, people go, oh, I heard this or I heard that, and you'll always gravitate to what suits your lifestyle. Someone said a glass of wine a day is fantastic. I like that. I don't know who said it, but I like it. So that's now my my gospel.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas when you get someone who's like, okay, and it sounds crazy, doesn't it? Like if someone says, okay, I want to have a six pack that I've never had. I want to be stronger than I've ever been. I want to be more flexible than I've ever been. I've never done it, but I know what I need to do to get there. It's like, you've never been there. How can you tell me that you know how to do it? Right. And I'm not saying use me. Find a coach or find a mentor, someone that holds you accountable, that has done that knows the path, that can teach you the path, give you the information, and avoid the pitfalls.
But above all, I think there's two things here. The accountability piece, I think, is really big. And the other one that I think is a must when you're going on any, or committing to anything like this is, not motivation. I'm motivated to do anything.
Yeah.
It's actually the discipline.
Yeah.
That discipline and that drive to make yourself better at the end of the day, because once you become better and you feel better, then it sort of perpetuates to your family life and your personal life, and I think you just feel better overall, right? And I think that's a big one.
Yeah.
But then also, Mike, I want to ask you, how do you better yourself as a coach? Because obviously you're dealing with people all the time, but for you, how do you find a way to keep proving, keep learning, being more analytical per se, and giving that genuine and the best information possible?
Well, I think there has to be like a level of humility there. I think humility, particularly for men, is so important. We're all limited to one extent or another by our ego, right? And I remember when I was younger, my ego was enormous, right? And I thought I knew everything. I knew nothing, but I thought I knew everything. As a lot of young guys do, right? I knew nothing. And that's why a lot of people are resistant to get accountability or whatever, because they want to tell themselves that they know it all, But, sorry, I've just digressed there and I completely forgotten the question. What's the question?
So I'm saying, how do you get better yourself?
Right, yes.
How do you keep
There we go.
improving?
So it's like when clients come to me with, luckily, like I said, now the type of client demographic that I coach, they have a lot of similar concerns, similar issues, right? So it's like longevity, mobility, energy levels, avoiding health scares, stuff like that. So to give an example, recently, I've always done blood panels for clients, but recently I've invested in learning more on that, and actually, so in a nutshell, I'll try to keep this short, but a lot of blood measures and blood averages, when they say, okay, you're within the average range, let's say for testosterone. Right. There's loads we could say about testosterone, but to give you an idea of what I try to mean in this instance is that the testosterone of a 30-year-old man now is significantly lower than it was 50 years ago. Right. Yeah.
Why is that?
And that because of, like being sedentary, like social media use or just phone use, technology in general, diet, alcohol, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it's a fraction of what it was 50 years ago.
Jesus,
yeah?
That's scary.
So you imagine that you're being told that your testosterone's within a normal range, but it's in, let's say the average man is, because the average man now is overweight, a lot of them struggling with, different, whether it's mental health, mood, stuff like that. I don't think you should be tested against, or compared against that, because if you go in and say, oh, where's my testosterone? Because I'm feeling a bit low, my libido's dropped off, I'm not very strong in the gym, I'm not very motivated. And your doctor goes, well, you're within normal range. Yeah, but you're being compared to a very poor normal range, right? So what I'm doing now is looking into blood work more analytically. I want to develop my knowledge. So I'm not interested in the average. I heard a statistic, I think it was I might butcher this, so I don't want anyone to quote me on it, but I think it was the average 40-year-old man in America is obese, struggling with mood, and has less than £1,000 in the bank account, or less than $1,000 in the bank account. Now, if that's the average that you're being compared against, it's very easy to go, okay, well, I'm doing all right, right? And that's not to say anything negative about people in that group, but it's going, right, we want something a little bit more representative of where our health is.
Yeah.
But, don't just say, oh, well, I'm in the same range as someone obese. I don't want to be in the same range as someone obese. I want to know more about my levels.
Right.
So that's why I'm trying to get more intricate with that. So things like that, understanding the advancements in the, we didn't have all this knowledge on sleep data like even 10 years ago, there's papers coming out all the time, there's advancements coming out all the time, so I try to, where possible, to keep my finger on the pulse.
And at the same time, you have a podcast
Yes.
that I also want to talk about. So the name of the podcast is
The last people that should have a podcast.
The Last People. And with the types of clients and or guests that you have on those shows, what do you discuss?
So we it's interesting with the podcast. We're looking at kind of where masculinity is currently, and what has kind of happened to masculinity over recent years and the perspective on masculinity.
Right.
So, you know, you hear terms banded around like toxic masculinity and things like that. So we try to get on men who are high achieving in various fields. We've had on, you know, bodybuilders, former Marines. We had a chap recently, Matt from the Food Review Club. We had a biohacker on, Lucas, like people who are doing really well in their industry, like can give an authentic view on what they're doing, but also their perspectives on masculinity.
Right.
Yeah.
And because I want to understand also, you must be learning quite a lot because again, on that specific topic, there is a lot of negative press.
Yes.
And a lot of negative connotations that goes towards that. But I also understand that, you know, and a lot of the big podcasters are talking about, you know, when it comes to gents overall, they are at the moment the lowest performing they've ever been, the most overweight they've ever been. And again, I think it goes back to not having a proper sense of purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think something, again, which is as simple as doing exercise, which you take for granted, is a sense of purpose.
Exactly.
You know?
If you know, our body is what, without sounding too philosophical, our body is the vehicle that carries us through life, right?
Right.
If we lose control over that, what do we have control of?
Right.
You know? And then from there, it can spiral into low mood, depression, things like that, mental health struggles. And I don't want to make it sound too simplistic or that I'm not giving other things the respect they deserve. But if you start with your body, but just by taking care of your body, taking care of how you move it, what you put into it, show it some respect, everything else is going to upgrade. And, you know, like on our podcast, James and I are both coaches. That's how we met. And yeah, like it's part of our lifestyle. And it's just, we talk about the benefits from just having a fit, functional body, like being able, and it's not just lifting weights in the gym, it's being able to do the hobbies that you enjoy. Like we're both Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts. We talk about the camaraderie that we found with other men in Jiu-Jitsu gyms.
Right.
Whereas we joke about like the kind of misconception that, oh, I don't want to go into that jiu-jitsu gym because they're all savages and they're all trying to kill each other and they'll probably kill me if I walk in there.
Right.
Where actually it's an outlet for aggression in a safe way.
Yeah.
And then after that's done, like laughing and joking and the banter is like top level. You know?
I call it, physical chess.
Yes. Yeah. So you've done Muay Thai, right? So it's
Yes,
similar thing, right?
Yeah.
You go in there and, you know, God help those poor pads, you know, but afterwards you're having banter, like there isn't useless aggression. And people who go in there with like inflated egos or trying to be too aggressive or a bad representation of masculinity, they get found out pretty quick and they don't stay around long.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Don't they? I mean, we've all seen it, right?
Yes.
People go into gyms with the wrong atmosphere,
100%.
wrong attitude, and it doesn't go well for them.
So within your career, what would you say have been so far the biggest lessons you've taken away and learnt on a daily basis?
I think understanding that there's always something, going back to what I said there about ego, I'm so, in a way, like when I look back at the younger version of me, like I'm almost embarrassed at where my ego was and what my attitude was. But I'm also so grateful that I got to the point where I was able to start reaching out, asking for help, getting coaches, getting mentorship, investing in my business, investing in my knowledge, understanding that knowledge is power. And the more you develop that, I can help more. And I can also understand the journey because I've been through that journey. just go, right, you invest in yourself, you invest in progressing, you're accepting that there are people out there that know more than you, because there always is. You can learn from absolutely everyone, but you need a certain amount of humility and a certain amount of control of the ego to be able to go, he's got an incredible knowledge base on that. I want to pick his brains on that. I want to be the student here. So I think that would probably be the big one, is always being a student.
So now, Mike, we've come to the quick fire questions. And the good thing is, I know that you've been a head chef before. So,
Yeah,
so
there
you'll
you go.
answer this easily.
I'll give you some tips if you want.
Please. So, first thing, can you tell me your favorite ingredient?
Favorite ingredient? Oof. Double cream.
Double cream.
Yeah.
Oh, I expected eggs, but okay, fair enough. Now, would you say you like pickled or spicy?
Spicy.
Fish and
pickles
chips?
are for pirates.
Pickling is for pirates?
Pirates, yeah. You know, like this is what I say to people. I had this big debate on like whether pickles belong on burgers. And
Right.
I said, keep pickles off my burgers. It ruins it. Like if you don't have a fridge, you can't afford a fridge. You need to pickle stuff to keep it good. I'm not interested. I don't need to talk to you.
Wow.
Right, so pickling is for pirates.
There's a lot of people that will be messaging you personally. Fish and chips or Sunday roast?
Fish and chips.
Who would you say are your top 3 culinary heroes? And they don't necessarily need to be chefs.
Okay. One is a chef. Like I went through a phase where I just got really interested in kind of cooking and chefs and stuff like that. And I read White Heat by Marco Pierre White. So, and I think he's a bit of a lad as well. So yeah.
Legend.
So Marco Pierre White. Who else? Say Rick Stein, maybe.
Yeah.
I used to watch a lot of his stuff. And this is going to sound too complimentary, but yourself.
Well, thank you.
Chef JKP.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Now, from all of the amazing cuisines around the world, what would you say are your current top 3 favorite cuisines to eat?
So always Spanish. Love Spanish.
So that's number 1. Let's
number
say.
1.
All right.
Well, it's in the top 3.
All right.
Sure.
Top 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Italian has to be there as well. Italian's great. And it would be between Thai and Japanese.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm gonna go Japanese.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, from all your years as a head chef and a nutrition coach and an elite coach, what would you say has been your funniest either kitchen incident or restaurant incident that you've seen or been involved in?
Right. So one that stands out, obviously we've talked about me like spilling batter all over the floor on my first day, and I remember I was actually working on the bar, and my first day as a bar, I was carrying 2 trays of glasses and just smashed them all over the place. Yeah. It was just like, I've been working for about half an hour. Like the exit's there. If I go, I don't even need to front this out.
Wow.
So that's what I was thinking of leaving. But a funny one that sticks out to me, actually, that happened, that I went to a fine dining establishment in Jersey. I won't mention the name of the place. And I'm not really a drinker, but I was taking someone out for a meal to say thank you. And they wanted to do the wine pairing.
Right.
So I've always admired wine and knowledge about wine and stuff like that, but don't really drink, so don't really know a lot about wine. First course comes, and there was an accompanying white wine. Can't remember what it was. I tasted it. I was like, that doesn't taste right. And it almost tasted watered down, you know. And I don't know what made me confident enough, but I got the sommelier over and said, I think this is corked. It doesn't taste right. And he kind of looked down his nose at me and was like, corked, you know, like, or whatever. Like,
right,
he was basically saying, you've got no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
Took it away. I guess the manager, and I'm just watching over my shoulder, and I manage it, and then suddenly there's this big kerfuffle going on, and there was a lot of shouting, and and then he comes over, tail between his legs. I'm so sorry, sir. That is, So,
Nice.
so that was a funny experience. Yeah. So I couldn't have told you like what the wines were after that. My knowledge of wine is, all I know is I only liked 2 of them out of the 7.
Yeah.
But
it's good that you knew.
yeah, I was like, that can't be right. Even with my limited knowledge, that can't be right. But it was funny. His reaction was like,
But do you know what is even worse is that, so the rules are in a restaurant, whether it's casual, fast food, fine dining, everyone is VIP.
right, yeah.
Everyone. So even if his thoughts were, what do you know? There is no way he should have looked at you like that. He shouldn't have made you feel that way.
Yeah.
So that's a big lesson there, But well done for doing that. I like it. Now, I think I know this one, but what advice would you give to a 16-year-old Michael Canas?
Shut up and listen. But yeah, like in a bit more detail, it would be, be open to learning stuff. Yeah, I think by that point I hadn't really started on my fitness journey. Like I was just doing a lot of sports and stuff. So I'd probably say, right, start looking into the gym, start watching what you're eating, but listen more, talk less.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, final question is, what advice would you give to anyone who is looking to begin their health and wellness journey?
My advice would be start small, but establish what you want. Okay, because a lot of people confuse themselves by telling themselves they want what they see on social media, what they hear other people say. Is I want to get in a bit. Or do you remember the magazines? I don't know if there's many magazines out anymore, but particularly women. I feel for women. Like you look at the cover of like Cosmopolitan or Vogue or stuff like that. It's always like get a bikini body, reduce your waist size, get a Brazilian bum, whatever it is. Like forget about all that rubbish. Like what do you want? What really what would light a fire in you? Yeah, and then try as best you can to remove emotion from it. How am I going to get there? What is the first step? The first step might be just moving a little bit more. The first step might be reducing how much alcohol you're having, or spending more time in bed, or going to the gym, or getting a gym membership. And then again, once you can be honest with yourself and go, actually, if you establish that accountability is the issue and you keep telling yourself you know what to do, but you never do it, then it's accountability. Then reach out to someone, whether it's a coach, whether it's a mentor, whether it's whatever it is. But just the power of accountability and being held to a higher standard than you would hold yourself, just open new doors for you.
Brilliant. Now, if anybody wants to get hold of you through social media, how can they do that?
So I'm on Instagram, Michael Canas MC. And yeah, Michael Canas on Facebook, on LinkedIn. I haven't got around to TikTok yet, but I will do. Yeah.
I'll put all of that in the show notes.
Perfect.
Now, Mike, I just wanted to say thank you very, very much for taking the time to be here today. I know it's not the usual chat, but it's been extremely extensive, full of detail and full of inspiration. Thank you very, very much on behalf of the Chef JKP podcast to take the time to give us so much detailed, incredible knowledge. Please keep inspiring everyone, because the work that you're doing is absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. Been a pleasure.
Wow. That wasn't just a podcast. That was a straight up A-game plan to getting your health and mindset back on track. Michael made this whole subject feel so accessible. No fluff, no gimmicks, just real talk, which I've already started applying some of his advice myself. And let me tell you, it really works. What I love the most is he gets the hospitality life. He knows what it takes to be surrounded by food and dealing with stress, strange hours, and still trying to show up strong. But that's what it's about. If there's one thing I want you to take away from today, is that your health is your foundation. If you can't perform your best in the kitchen or in the restaurant, what's the point? So please re-listen, take a share it with your friends or someone out there who really needs to listen to this. Michael, a massive thank you for your wisdom, and your energy was next level. All of the links will be in the show notes as always, so you can see where Michael is and how you can get a hold of him. Now, don't forget that you can now watch us on YouTube. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that follow, share, and subscribe button. And if you want to, drop us a little cheeky 5-star review. If you feel inspired by today's show, that's all we want you to do, is just to make sure that you smash it and give it to friends and start your journey. And don't forget what Mr. Apollo Creed from the Rocky films said: there is no tomorrow. So start your journey today. Thank you very much for staying until the very, very end of the show, you absolute legend. Until next time, food is memories.